On April 20th, 2023, Moonbin, the popular actor, singer, model in South Korea and part of the group Astro, was found unresponsive in his apartment by his manager. He was dead, and it is thought that this was due to suicide. This video will look at why suicide is so prevalent in South Korea, but also in the industry of Korean pop music. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about the suicide rate in South Korea and give some reasons as to why it might be as high as it is. You know, these reasons that I give, they also apply to other situations as well, not just to K-pop, which is Korean pop music. But I might add with that, it's not just pop music, there are other genres as well. Then I'm going to talk about Moonbin in particular, give you a case example, because this is a very recent occurrence of suicide in K-pop. And I'll offer a takeaway from this video, which relates to suicide. Thanks for joining. And, you know, I've been into Korean pop, or K-pop as it's known. Again, other genres, R&B, hip-hop, rap, rock, and pop for quite a while now, way before it became the behemoth it is now in the world. It's quite popular, mainstream. But I was into it some time ago, and even then there were instances of suicide happening in the entertainment industry. People were killing themselves, and this has been going on for a long time. And, you know, even as recently as last year, I've heard of a few cases that have happened in K-pop. And this video has been prompted by another instance of suicide, Moonbin, who I will talk a bit more about in a little while. Now in Korea, let's just talk about South Korea in general. And when I say Korea, I'm talking about South Korea throughout this video. The suicide rate in the last 20 years has more than doubled. And it's actually the 5th leading cause of death in South Korea. And that's actually above road traffic accidents. This is, you know, quite a big deal. You know, we're talking about suicide, people taking their own lives. It's the 5th leading cause of death in South Korea. So what's going on? What are the reasons for this? And this video isn't just about South Korea or K-pop. This video is actually about suicide. And what I talk about here can translate to other places and other situations and contexts. The reasons I'm going to give for why it's prevalent in K-pop and in South Korea can be transposed to other situations and contexts in some instances. It doesn't matter what job you do, you might be influenced or impacted by some of the reasons I'm going to give. So they can be generalized out a little bit as well. So normally we would expect that people who might think about life being hopeless or too challenging or difficult in ways might just be the average population, you know, not people in the entertainment industry. You know, we see glamorized images of lifestyles that are airbrushed and amazing looking. We see fantasy. We see it's all glitter and happy faces and, you know, shiny. People look like they're living their best lives when they're working in these industries, don't they? But actually, in the K-pop industry, it's become highly prevalent, suicide that is. And so the question is, what's actually going on? Why is the rate of suicide so high in K-pop? Suicide is serious, it is complex, and the reason for it will vary between people. So I don't want to come across like I'm making generalizations here. But these reasons that I'm going to give are some possible reasons to think about. And my hope is that with a bit more understanding, we might be able to save lives. So what makes it so prevalent then in K-pop? Well, there's a huge amount of pressure and stress that results from that pressure when one works in this industry of K-pop. Because of course we could say this about any entertainment business or industry in the world, you know, Hollywood or the UK or wherever it is. But K-pop is a different beast altogether. If you watch some K-pop videos, you'll see the production value is amazing. Every detail, there's so much nuance. It's absolutely, everything is deliberate, is thought through, and it's just so. Now, this is how people are having to live. The people who are featured in these videos, who are singers, actors, models, all of the above, they have to lead very scrutinized lives that are judged all the time. And they have to, they're practicing all the time, they're working all the time. This leads to exhaustion and then further stress. And they have to maintain this image, this perfection, this perfect image they have that's being portrayed of them. They have to maintain that. They have to maintain their success level as well, their fan base. There's a lot that's riding on them. And there's a lot of pressure and therefore a lot of exhaustion because of the hard work and a lot of stress. So this can become very overwhelming and it can lead to further mental health problems. So we've got the physical health issue here, which is the exhaustion, which actually can make us less resilient and therefore emotionally and mentally vulnerable. So this can then lead to anxiety, depression. And then if you've got a kind of another what's called a disorder in psychiatry, if you've got something like borderline personality disorder, or if you're experiencing some other kind of personality disorder or other issues in life, these are added on to that pressure, to that stress, to that overwhelm, and you're more vulnerable to other mental health problems. So, this can all lead to suicidal ideation, the thought of not wanting to be around, to just escape it all, to just let it all go, to not feel that burden anymore, to just want to escape. And we can see why. And other things that would cause someone to want to leave the situation, to escape this difficult life, this grueling life, is things like cyberbullying. Now, this cyberbullying, hate speech, all of this, people in the industry are very much exposed to this all the time. They will hear about it in the media. They will read it on their social media. They'll hear about it from the record labels, their agencies. It's constant. It's unrelenting. And what does this do to a person's esteem? What does it do to their sense of self-worth and value? If you just think about if you had your YouTube account and somebody's posting some negative, hateful messages to you, that can really affect your day. That can affect you in a very visceral, deep way. Imagine if that was times 1,000,000. What could that do to someone who's already experiencing some of the things I've mentioned before? Of course, that's going to impact mental health further. And then what does one need when all of this is going on? We need support. We need relationships. We need people to help us out. Unfortunately, for those in the industry of K-pop, many of them will have been in the industry from a very early age because they start off very young. They're training before they launch. They need to be the best at dancing, at singing, at other languages because they learn other languages so that they can release music in other parts of Asia and in English. So it's very taxing on a person. And then what that means also, the byproduct of being in this industry from a young age, is that you don't go to regular school. You don't form those normal relationships, those experiences that we all take for granted. And what this means then is that the relationships that you need when things are going the way I've described, they're just not there. And even if you have close relationships, they may be with people who are in a similar situation to yourself, someone who's been in the industry, because you only interact with those people. Another thing is you might have some good family connections or some friends from maybe before, but your schedule is such that you don't get to spend time with them or interact with them that much to get the kind of relief that you might need and support. And we also have to think about the culture that K-pop is within, It's in a stoic culture, a collectivist culture. Self-reliance is valued. People are expected to do their best for the collective to ensure that they don't burden others. And this can be a very difficult thing for someone who's grown up in that culture, who is then expected to be a shining exemplar for the rest of society, who cannot be seen as weak, as some people might judge people who are suffering mentally or emotionally. So this means they have to hide their struggle, the difficulty that they're going through. They have to be strong. They have to appear strong at least. And so people are hiding what's really going on. They're not able to talk about it. They're not able to get the support that they need. And so they're very much isolated by this kind of way of being. You know, in South Korea and in other parts of Asia, people in the industry, like singers and actors, they're actually known to be, they're called idols. So these are idols. Idols have to be strong. They cannot be needy. They cannot be in need. And yet they're human and they need others just like we all do. And then this reason that suicide might be so prevalent in K-pop and in South Korea is to do with prevalence. What I mean here is if you're in a family where there's some kind of condition that someone has, like alcoholism or depression, anxiety, or some other, personality disorder, as they're called, anything like that, it's more than likely that you too are more vulnerable and predisposed to that same condition or a similar one. And this is in part thought to be due to genetic factors. With the genetic side of it, I would say that's disputable in my mind. It depends on what the condition is as well. But also to do with your environment and what you grow up in and what you learn, what you see. So if you are around depression growing up, it's very likely that you will be impacted by that and you might experience depression, because if you're around that kind of sadness, how are you going to feel? You're not going to be the most upbeat or optimistic person. It's not what you've been shown. And when we're around someone who is depressed, if we're around them all of the time, especially like parent-child dynamic, it will affect our mood, because it makes us sad to see that as well. And it also makes us sad because we start to feel what's happening to that person ourselves. And so you see, it can impact us in that way. Sometimes when suicide happens in a family, you can see that it happens more in that family than it might in other families. And what's happened there? Well, if we think about South Korean society, suicide is very prevalent. It's more than doubled, as I said, in the last 20 years, and especially younger people as well. So what that means is in the industry of K-pop, where it's also very prevalent, this has become an option. It's become normalized. People have become desensitized to it. If you're reading about it every other month, let's say, it will come up in your mind. It will cross your mind when you're suffering. And when someone is feeling so hopeless about life and their situation and the lack of support or the pressure they feel to maintain a facade, suicide might seem like the way out of all of that. Now, on April 20th of this year, 2023, Moonbin, who, as I mentioned before, is a popular musician, an actor and a model, and he was part of the K-pop group Astro. He was found dead by his manager. And even though they haven't confirmed the cause of death as suicide, this is what people believe and what's been reported. Moonbin was only 25 years old. Now, as I said before, K-pop idols start out very young, and Moonbin started when he was 11 years old. He was a child. That's very young age to be in such a grueling sort of way of living. He's not able to have a childhood in a way. He's working harder than a lot of adults would work. And there's a lot of scrutiny on him at such a young age as he's growing up. And it's all he's known since that time, a lot of pressure. And if you think about the media, the social media culture, it's 24/7 now. You can't really get away from it. It's there all the time. People can be videoed all the time. They can be spending time privately and still be videoed. It's just intense. South Korea as well is number 10 in terms of social media usage in the world. That's pretty high. So we've got this 24/7 social media culture. And South Korea has an incredibly high rate of social media use. And so people like idols are expected to be these perfect exemplars. No such thing as perfection. But under those kinds of conditions, how could anyone even be close to that ideal of perfection? It's so grueling. It's so difficult. There's so much there that's going on. In 2019 and 2020, Moonbin did take some breaks from the industry, from work, to rest, to recover. And it's thought that this was due to anxiety and depression, perhaps, and exhaustion. He didn't take enough time off. He wasn't given as much time as perhaps he needed. But I think the problem here was he was given this break, but then he was thrown back in to the same routine whatever. It's a kind of a routine, I suppose. But he was thrown back in to the same thing that had caused the problems in the first place, without really having the time to fully recover and restore and heal. And so it's kind of like he was afforded a break, but then right back in. Another break in 2020, then right back in. And now we're in 2023. Now Moonbin may have felt like he should be more strong. There's been reports that he has said that he had to be mentally strong. And perhaps when he really felt that he just couldn't carry on, he may have experienced shame. He may have experienced a sense of being a failure and feeling like he couldn't speak to anyone and ask for another break. And, this is really sad, because it would have been a different story if he was allowed to feel valid and to ask for that break. So, this is where I want to offer a takeaway, because as I said, some of the things I mentioned, even though I'm talking about Moonbin and I'm talking about Kpop and I'm talking about South Korea, no country, no place in the world is immune to suicide. It's a human experience. It's part of the human condition. And I think it's important that I know I've spoken a bit about what might have happened for Moonbin and maybe some in the K-pop industry. And this is speculation, which really we shouldn't do. But at the same time, we need to understand what might have gone on here to prevent it. When it comes to something like mental health and support, we really have to think about these things. Physical health, when there's something wrong with us physically, we get it checked out. If we're worried and there's a risk to our life, we will get that checked out. When it's mental health, we need to be equally, if not more, vigilant to it. It's very risky to life to ignore some of the signs that we really should pay attention to. And whenever I hear about suicide from someone, whether they're talking about experiencing ideation, feeling hopeless about life, I always tell them something that a client once said to me who had experienced suicidal ideation and who I feel was helping herself with this idea. She said, don't choose a permanent solution for a temporary problem. And that is so profound, because there's a real implication in that. It tells us that whatever's happening now, however dire it might feel and hopeless, that's now. And that's within the context of what you're feeling now and what you're going through now and what life is looking like now. But it can change. Once a person has gone and taken their life, well, that cannot be undone, sadly. And I remember watching a video about people in the US who think it was the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, where people jump off this when they commit suicide. And there have been some survivors. One thing they've said is as soon as they jump, they regret it. In South Korea, because of the prevalence of suicide, they actually do mock funerals. They will allow you to go and attend your own funeral. Well, rather, what I should say is the person who's feeling suicidal will go and lie in a coffin and have their family come and enact a funeral. It's very interesting that they have to do that because of how high the prevalence is. But of course, again, this gives people some kind of perspective. So if you or anyone you know is experiencing what are known as dark thoughts, not wanting to be here, feeling hopeless, remember this is to do with what's going on now. And there is help. There's always help available, whether that be family or friends, whether that be public services, whether that be charity or charitable organizations, whether that be a therapist, but there's always help available. So don't suffer alone. And if you know someone who might be suffering, if you suspect that someone might be feeling this way, don't be afraid to start that conversation, because sometimes people just need to tell someone. And once that happens, then they can get the support they need. Now, I've been so lucky to witness someone move from daily suicidal ideation to wanting to live again. And I've seen this more than once, I've seen it many times. It really shows me that this is possible, and it's probable if someone can get the help that they need. So my other add-on to not seeking a permanent solution to a temporary problem is please, please, please talk to someone. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll subscribe and join us again soon and like our video, and looking forward to the next one.